Okay, so I tried to get an angle to show how I plan on supporting this batting. I may have to cut it as I add to it. It might get too heavy, and also, if you recall, I hooped that design. I hooped the quilt sandwich, the top, the batting, and then the backing. And since I hooped it, it's going to be a little difficult back here. As you can see, I have, this fabric here. This is the end, my backing, you can see. And, I had to like pull this out because this is hooped. Now, if it were floated, everything would just float on top, and it would actually be easier, and you could get in the center of your quilt easier and so on. But if you're going to hoop it, you pretty much have to work on the edge. I'm assuming. So, but we'll see. Well, I only have this little section, so I may have to cut my batting. Now, when I get down here, I can flip the design. That's not a problem. And so on. So we'll see. I wanted to show you what I'm using to support it, just so you can see. This is a, I know it's black, but it's a computer table, and it's curved. Let me show you. You can see how it's got a curve, and it's nice to have the curve facing the machine, and it's level with the hoop somewhat, pretty close, and that's what you want. And it's slippery too, and that's also what you want. Now, how I'm laying the fabric on, I'm kind of leaving a little bit of slack there. I don't know if that's good or bad, but as far as the distance between, here's the edge, between the edge and the hoop, well, I have to look at where the needle is right now. I just pulled up the design, and the machine always defaults to the center of the hoop, not the center of your design or how you hooped it, but the true center of the hoop, like when you put the grid on. So, and needle number 1 is the first one, and so of course needle number 1 is right at the center. At this, needle number 1 is right at the 0, 0 point. And you could pull that down, and since I'm filming, I'm not going to pull it down right now because I'm not in my element yet, and you never know, I could forget that it's pulled down and then bend the presser foot bar or something. So take my word, it's in the center of the grid, and I have to think about where this table is. And so since this hoop is about 8 inches in height and it's at the center, I've got 4 inches here and 4 inches here. So when the needle goes all the way up there, that means that the hoop is going to come down 4 inches more. It's going to move 4 inches up, which means the carriage is moving 4 inches out. So I want this distance to be right here where my thumb is. I want this position here to be where my table ends, and give myself more slack. So right now it's right about at the 4 inches on these bigger parts. So I think I'm going to be okay leaving it here. I don't know how I'm going to film this with it here, but we'll try our best. So let me go ahead and put the tripod in place. I'll be right back. Okay, so I got about as close as I could get to try to get the screen and the design in. And if you recall, on the last video series, or the last video in this series, the first video in this series, I just printed out the template. Sometimes when you print it out, it's easier to center it because you could just use needle up, needle down. If you stitch on plastic, clear plastic or vinyl, or if you print out a template on stencil material, then you really can't do a needle down, needle up, because you're going to, first of all, you can't go through stencil material, and second of all, you, if it were clear vinyl, you would, you'd ruin it, you know, puncturing through the vinyl. Paper is, we could just print another template. So it's up to you which way. When you're lining up your nested blocks, I like printing it on clear vinyl and just dialing the needle down to see if I'm in the right position. So, but like I said, it's up to you. So here's the design. I pulled it up. Now you'll see it's got a lot of 10 colors because I actually have the actual design stitching at the end, even though if I flip this up, the design is already stitched. So I just printed the template and then cut this out with my rotary cutter and then scissors to get into the points, and then I just taped it on top. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to assign my colors for these few, because I'm not stitching down here, of course, because that's the design. But I want to assign my colors and save this to the RCS unit just in case I mess up my center coordinates and have to close out of the design and get back in. Because remember, once you adjust your center, you know, if you hooped incorrectly, once you adjust your center and then go into the menu button, when you come out of menu, it goes back to the hoop center. So you can't adjust your center with these buttons anymore because you'll just be compounding your centering on top of the centering you already did. So you have to close out of the design and pull it back up again, which would mean you'd have to assign your colors again, which would be a pain. So I'm just going to go ahead and assign my colors and save it to the RCS, because when you save it to the RCS, it comes back with the colors already assigned. So I know that was a long explanation, but it's, you know, it's complicated. So anyways, I'll assign the colors then. Let me get my stylus so I'm not totally in the way. We'll hit this button here. Here's the assign button. One is just, the first color is just my crosshair that I'm going to eventually trace to see if I need to rotate. So I'll do that with needle number 1 like it has, and I'll put a red stop on it because, you know, and I'm putting a red stop on everything just because I don't want to be stressed out. So anyway, so that's the first color. And then the second color you'll see is a little pentagon that I made that's the shape of the outer edge of my satin. I did that in Embird Studio, and I made it fit the outer edge of my satin exactly because I'm going to trace the points of that pentagon to make sure that my swirl, my nested block, is going to stitch exactly centered around this pentagon. So this is going to be another trace. I'll put it on needle 1 and I'll put my stop on. I'll go to the next one. Now this is my design. And I'm going to stitch that with needle number 1 again. Really needle number 1, I'm going to stitch it. I have gold thread in there. And I'm going to put a stop on that too, because I want it to stop after that, because I'm not sure how I want to complete it. I made this so that it travels around the pentagon, but it's not going to travel. Yeah, I think I did make it travel exactly around, but as it does a swirl and comes back and travels to the next swirl, it does leave a little teeny weeny little gap there, because these swirls don't exactly meet in the same point when it comes down here. If this pentagon that I made is not completely centered perfectly around this pentagon, I'm going to go to this next color, which is a blanket stitch. So it's using the same outline, but it does the blanket stitch inward around the design. And I think I only made this 4 millimeters long as it jumps to the inside, because I thought that the blanket stitch would take your eye away from any imperfection that I had. So I don't know yet which way I'm going to do this. So, and not do the blanket stitch. But at any rate, let's go to this blanket stitch and assign it needle 1, of course. And I will put a stop on it because I don't want it to go into the rest of my design here now. So that's basically what I'm saving, is just these 4 colors, and they're all needle 1 and they all have stops, so it's kind of easy. So I'll say okay. Whoops, this is the button here. When you have this, you don't say okay usually. And I'll just go back again to get to the ready to sew screen so I can save it here. And I'm going to save it in the RCS unit in this Mb4 file. And I thought that I had it saved already. Let me see if I could find, what would I have called it? So I'm on the F's now, I'm paging forward. Heart Swirl 4. I think that was it. I think because I used a 4 millimeter blanket stitch, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't remember. But I'll just go ahead, and so it'll be saved in there, because I don't want to have too many heart swirls because I get confused. So then I'll hit OK, because at this point I think if you hit this, then it doesn't really save. So I'm going to hit OK. Same file exists. That's when you know you're really saving it, and I'll hit OK. All right, so now it's saved. So now I'm going to check to see if I hooped it correctly, if I hooped it in the center. So we're not doing rotation now, we're just doing centering. So remember, this needle is going to the center of the hoop. Well, I have to make sure my design is in the center of the hoop. So I'm going to push this down. In mine, I have to go in here and see why it's not locking as good as the others. I think you just have to tighten things up, but I'm not sure. But it is locking, and I'm not sure if it's, yeah, it looks like it's off center. So to to get this to go down farther, you have to, I'm going to have to go on the other side so I don't block the camera. You want to hold your finger on the needle. I just put it here on this needle. You can do it here, but that's kind of dangerous. They tell you not to do that. And they tell you not to even do it this way. They tell you to use something like something plastic, and you know, that's kind of hard. And I wouldn't use metal. So they did say to use a metal screwdriver, but I wouldn't want to do that. But anyways, as I'm pushing down, I will dial the hand wheel towards me. I'm on the left side of the machine, so I'm dialing it clockwise. And when you do that, it pops back up, I've noticed. So if you really want to have the needle go into the fabric, I heard an instructor, old video of Janome, that you have to dial the hand wheel clockwise while you're pushing down on the needle from the start. So if you want the needle to go down, or I could just do needle up, needle down. So I'm pushing, I heard it lock, I'm still pushing and I'm still dialing, and now it gets to this point and it seems really hard to move the hand wheel. But if you move it, if you dial it, yes, it does go down, and that needle is down in there. Oh, looks like I'm right in the center. Jeez, Lisa, let's see. Oh no, I'm actually above center. I'm actually above center, maybe 2 mils. So I'm going to dial the hand wheel again towards me, or I could hit needle up, needle down, and let it go back. Now, I don't have to worry about dialing it perfectly back, because when I go over here to push the jog button, it's going to warn me, hey, your needle bar's out of alignment, hit the OK button. So I'm going to go over there, and I'm going to hit my jog button. I was up too far. I'm going to go down 2 mils. So, see, it warned me. Needle bar's out of position. Press OK to move needle bar to switching position. Okay. So now I have to push this down, or I can do a needle down, needle up. You can see it was way up there. I'll just do a needle down, needle up now that you know how to do it the other way, and save some time. I am going to make a hole in the paper though, but that's okay. So let me try that again. I went 8 times. I'm going to do a needle up, needle down. Okay. It might have gone in the center. I'm going to have to dial it down. Now, since I'm starting from this position, as I'm turning the hand wheel, the needle won't go in. But this presser foot will go down. And it'll get pretty close. So, and then you have to hold it down. I'm going to go down some more. Press OK. Let me see. I went 4. Dial the hand wheel. Okay. I am right in the center. Oop. Okay. I can almost go to the left 2. Oh. I'm just going to go 2 to the left. Because, you know, you really want to be exact with this mess I've created with doing this applique first and trying to go around this. Okay, I'm right on that cross here. Now, is my thing taped on correctly? I don't know. That's why we're going to go and trace this pentagon next. Now I'm going to fast forward just my thread color to the next thread color here. I'm not right-handed, so I can't even. Okay. So that's the starting point for the pentagon. It's not the outside of the pentagon. Remember, the pentagon that I'm tracing is one that I made in Embird, and it's this right here. It rides along the outer edge of the satin because I don't want this swirl to be stitching on my satin. You know, my satin is so gorgeous. So anyways, it's starting here. It's going to come up and make a turn. And when it makes this turn, I'll know it. And then so I'll know where this point is. And you'll see when I trace it. So I'm going to just push it down to trace it. So I use my fast forward. So I'm hitting the fast forward button right here in this screen here. So it's tying on. Okay, there. Do you see how it just turned the corner? So I'll rewind, and that's the point. And I'll rewind again just to show you. See, it went back on this line, and then I go forward. That's the point, because then it goes up there. So let me rewind one. Okay, so that's my point. So this needle should be on the point of the pentagon, hopefully. I'll see. I'm going to dial this down. Now, I actually want this to dial into the fabric. I could do a needle down, needle up right here. I have another puncture hole here because I tried this before, so I'm not sure which one it's going to be. So I'm just going to dial it. I'll dial it so it pops back up and wait for this the take-up lever to get up. When it's all good, the notch on the hand wheel will be up at what they call 270. It'll be in the upright position. So you can go back there and look for your notch. Okay, there, my notch is up at the top. So now I know I can push this at the same time as I'm dialing down, and the needle will go in. Oh, no, it didn't. Yeah, I don't know why it's not doing it now, but okay, well, I guess I will do a needle down, needle up. Let me make sure I have enough thread. I don't want to have to do this again. Oh, I think that's why. Okay, there's my thread coming out right at the point. So I don't even know if I'm going to have to rotate this. It's coming in at that point. It's probably going to come in at that point when I fast forward it. So that's good. I didn't even think of that it'll leave the thread in if you have a long thread tail there. And so you could see which hole actually it went in. So should I fast forward through to... See, I'm thinking that I didn't give it a chance to initialize because I had the needle locked down. because if you notice when I did the needle down, needle up, it had to initialize itself and reset the needle, the presser bar. I mean, not presser bar, but the take up lever. So anyways, it's confusing, I'm telling you. So I'll just fast forward over to this point and see. And then I'll also fast forward through the crosshair just so you could see how to use the crosshair as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, now turn the corner, so I'm going to rewind. So that's the point. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull thread out, push my take-up lever back, pull some thread out, and do a needle up, needle down. Yeah, I'm right at the point. So I'm sure I don't have to rotate this design. Too bad I hooped it so straight. So anyways, so it's going to stitch out great. Let me just go back to my crosshair like I said I would do, and I'll trace it for you. So my thread negative, if you want to see what's highlighted here, what's going to stitch, press this button here. Here the whole design is showing, but if you press this, it'll go to here, meaning only the part of the design that's going to stitch now will show, and that's the crosshair. So let's go ahead and trace the crosshair, because this is how generally we check for rotation. So remember, first we use our jog buttons to center, then we fast forward through a crosshair to check for rotation. So I might use my F button, and I'll fast forward through this. That's where my crosshair starts, but I want to get it in here so I can see it. I can't see what's going on over there. So I'm going to fast forward. Did its tie on. Okay, and so I'm going to just do a needle up, needle down, and just make sure you're not touching any part of the machine when you got your fingers in there. And I'm going to just hold my finger here. Yeah, I'm right on the cross here. Oh, you couldn't tell, but I'm right on it. And if I fast forward to the rest of it, let me rewind a little. Let me go a little. Okay, and I hate to waste all this thread. And I'll do a needle down, needle up. Here. So I don't have to rotate it. But if I did, I'd go into the menu button and remember, because if this were, say, up higher and the first one, then that means you think of the needle as a spinner. So that would mean that it's higher over here. That means that it's lower over there. So that would mean that you have to rotate the needle, or you could say the design or the needle, clockwise. If it's up like this, you have to rotate it clockwise. So you'd go into the menu button, you'd hit menu, and then this edit screen, and you'd hit the rotate here. And here's the clockwise one. That's the counterclockwise. You'd hit this and look down here, and you'd rotate it however many degrees you think would get you on your crosshair. Remember, you got 360 degrees, so if it's just up, you know, a couple millimeters, maybe that's like 2 degrees. So you would hit this once, and you'd see 1 degree. And the design rotated, which means the needle rotated. and then you'd hit it again, and there would be your 2 degrees, and you'd hit OK, but then just remember, when you are in this screen and then you go back to the ready to sew screen, your needle is going to go to the hoop center, the original hoop center, not the hoop center that you adjusted here, but the hoop center of its brain, you know, its default hoop center. But no worries, because our jog buttons are holding on this edit screen. So, in other words, you can only do your jog buttons once, basically, because if you go into the menu screen, you can't do the jog buttons anymore. Now, if you don't go into the menu screen, you can keep doing your jog buttons. But if you go into the menu screen to rotate, hit OK, go back out, and then you say, oh wait, my design's not centered anymore, and then you try to center it again, you're basically compounding the centering that you already did. So then your design shifts the same amount of numbers. It's crazy. So anyways, that's why if you think that you have to use the jog buttons again, you just have to close out of the design and pull it back up from where we saved it in the RCS unit. And then you don't ever have to worry about doing your colors again, because they're already set. So at any rate, I'm not going to have to rotate it, so I'm going to go back. So I'll go back. Now it's 1. And now it's 0. And I'll hit OK. And like I said, I'll show you, like if you were to put your grid back on and you were to do a needle up, needle down, it's, you know, because we were in that edit screen, it went to the hoop center for the grid, but if you take the grid away, it's not in the hoop center of your design, and you think, oh my God, my design is not centered anymore. But it is, because the edit screen has saved your jog button settings. So no worries. And if you do worry, you could test yourself and say, well, I'll fast forward through my crosshair again. Press this button. I'll fast forward through my crosshair again. And if you do so, you'll see, right now it seems a little high, but it's going to like jog down a couple mils and then go over to the crosshair. So watch. Okay. So I don't know if you saw it jogged down and went over. It like came down and then went over. Anyways, that is just one thing that took me a long time to realize, and I wish they would change that so that we could see what our settings were, you know, how much we moved it, and I wish it would hold it. And when it goes back to the ready to sew screen, I wish it would center on what we jogged, but it doesn't. But the edit screen has it held for us, has it saved. So anyways, I'm ready. I'm ready to sew. My design is centered. I didn't have to rotate. So I'm using, since this is quilting in the hoop, I wanted to share my settings. What I've been using, and I'm still experimenting with it because my machine was just serviced, but my bobbin on a digital Towa gauge, my bobbin reads 100 millinewtons, which is almost grams times 10, almost, but it's this button up here. Let me show you. Turn it on. So you could do either millinewtons or gram force, and it's on gram force, which is just, you know, like regular bobbin tension on a sewing machine is about 30 grams. Well, on my embroidery machine, I like to use, for regular embroidery, I like to use 200 millinewtons in the bobbin, or about 20 grams force, 20 grams. And then on the top, I like to use 150 grams or gram force, but for the top, I use the Tajima tension gauge. So that's what I use for regular embroidery. But for quilting in the hoop, you want the two threads to meet in the center where the batting is. So for quilting in the hoop, on the bobbin, I go down to 100. So I cut it in half on the digital Towa. 100 millinewtons, or 10 grams. And then the top is about 200. Now, what I've noticed is this thread that I'm using is on needle number 1. It's really thin. And I could not get 200 on it, even when I wrapped the pre-tensioner 1.5 times. So I wrapped the pre-tensioner, this here, instead of just going around and coming down, I came around and then came all the way around and then came around the spindle 1.5 times. So even at that, and then putting the tension on 9, I only got 175 instead of the 200. So it's as much as I can get because this is so thin. Now, with needle number 2, I have this blue thread. It's a little thicker, it's a little rougher, and it gives me the 200 grams by just wrapping it the regular 1/2 times like you normally do. You know, it gave me 210 grams on number 8. And it gave me 170 on number 7. Now, on number 9, it gave me 240 grams. On number 9, I was showing dots on the top only. Okay? That was without quilting, though, in it. I was just doing it on stabilizer because I just wanted to see, you know, what was going on. And on number 8, I showed dots on the top and the bottom, and the dots looked the same. They were sticking up. You could see them, but if you pricked on it with your fingernail, you couldn't feel them. That was 8. That was at 210 grams. So that told me that I think I'm going to use 8, and I think I'm going to use about 200 grams for the top and 100 in the bobbin. So 200 grams with the Tajima on the top and 10 grams in the bobbin, or 100 millinewtons in the bobbin. I just like to go by millinewtons because it's just easier to dial around and get to that number, close to that number. So 7 showed dots on the top and bottom too at 170, and the tension was okay, but I wanted it to be nice and tight because with quilting you're going through this batting that's, you know, batting is, people think it's heavy and dense. It's not. Batting is airy and light, and so it doesn't offer any restriction to the thread. So you really need to pull even more. And the other thing I did was my check springs. on the blue one, my check springs are just low. They're in the factory default position. Your check springs, if you recall, have to be a certain distance from the top. And mine are set at the factory settings on needle 2, 3, and 4 so far, but on needle, let me pull this thread out. There's tension here on blue. Okay. You can see on needle number 1, this one is lower. I don't know if you could see it. I just needed more tension here. And so I had to stick a Allen wrench inside here in that little black hole and loosen it and then push down all the way down to get this lower, just to give me more tension. That was just to get this 175. And that was because probably I was using this very thin gold thread. So, do I need to have this dialed down to its lowest position? I don't know. I didn't try other threads on here. So, all those things together can affect your tension. That's why you have to just measure it with a gauge, or else you're going to be just a mess, especially when you try to quilt in the hoop. So, I'm hoping this is going to turn out. I'm hoping. So if it doesn't, I have to stop this right in the middle and rip it out. So we're going to go ahead then and fast forward through to the design. I'm going to take my paper off. And we'll go down. We're on needle number 1 now, of course, the crosshair. I have this button pressed. It's going on the screensaver. Needle 2 is the pentagon. Needle 3 is the design. So I'll take my paper off. Try not to disturb. I'm just using Scotch tape so I don't pull up the design as I'm doing this. Or not the design, so I don't pull on the fabric. And I'm going to pull back the tension lever and pull out some thread. And I'm going to fast forward to the first stitch. I don't know if it's on the first stitch. I think it is. It is. But I'm going to hit the start button. Because when you go to, just so you know, when you fast forward your thread color to like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, anything but the first color, it takes you to the first stitch of that design. So you can just hold your thread so that we could do a needle down, needle up, and grab our bobbin thread and bring it to the top. I just like to do that. So I don't want a bird's nest down there. So I'm going to hit it once. It's going to give me a warning. Oh, that warning. Hit it once. Machine starts to run. After I see that, I hit the start button 2 times very fast. And that's how it does a needle up, needle down. I pull up on the top thread, and there's my bobbin thread. Oh, something happened. It's stuck. Okay, so with me doing all this needle down, needle up, I have something going on there you could see. So I have to take everything off the hoop and go and see, clean out my bobbin area. So I'll be right back. So just so you know, what I had to do was loosen the left screw, take out the right screw here, and then just gently lift this back, and this is the cutter right there, and there was a piece of thread stuck in the cutter, so if you pull it out this way it won't pull because it's stuck, you know, in between here. So I just pulled it from this way and pulled it out. So I don't know why that happened, but you know, maybe with me messing around with the hand wheel and that, I'm not sure. That actually never happens to me. So we'll go ahead and tighten that back up. Okay. Put my bobbin back in. Leave it hang, and we're back in business. So I'll kind of show you how I have to get this back in the hoop. You know, it's not easy because the fabric is hooped. So I'll just go ahead and, you know, because these still have to latch, and this table is actually in my way, so I'm going to have to move it. Okay. So I have to push that down the sides and make sure that they hang down, and make sure that this is out on both sides, and then I can push it in, start to push it in. And if I get halfway, make sure, you know, that I have my fabric pulled out. So I think I may try to find a better way of floating. I am dabbling with the thought of getting the table for this machine, and I don't know. Possibly getting like a different hoop, but all of the aftermarket hoops give you a smaller area. So that's why I thought floating would be better. I thought about finagling my hoop so that I could clamp it or put magnets on it. And I don't know. I'm not sure yet. So we'll see. So I have to make sure, of course you have to make sure that nothing is on the bottom. Nothing's going to stitch. And then I'll pull my table back. And I have to make sure that my table is 4 inches from the hoop. So give it a little bit of slack so it can move around. All right. So now I'm going to reverse. Make sure you can see that. Okay. Okay. So it went back to the canary yellow. If I press this button, whoops, it's showing just the pentagon. And we'll go to the next thread color, which is the design. And like I said, that's where it's going to start stitching. And I pull out enough thread to have my finger here on the hoop, and I'll do start, get the warning. Now I go 2 times. Okay, pulled up my bobbin thread. This time it's fine. I take both threads, place my finger on the hoop so the bobbin thread is flat and the top one is at an angle, and I hold my finger up against the side edge of the hoop here and press start, get the warning. Now just press it one more time. I'm going to check my tension, my fingernail. It looks good on the front. I'd like to be able to feel the back. So I'm going to take my fingernail and I'm going to go like this to see if I feel any pokies. I don't feel any, except at the beginning where there's like a knot. I just pulled this and the knot went away, the bulk of the knot, when I pulled these two. So, I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. So remember, I'm at 9 and this is really thin threads. So I have to take care with these and keep them out of the way because I'm going to bury these in the batting when it's done. So it is kind of a pain, but, you know, whatever. I'm OCD. So let's see how we do. Now my stitch length is 2.2 and 1.8 is the smallest, just so that the curves look pretty. And I decided to make it 2.2 instead of 2.3 or 2.5, just because it's embroidery thread and I'm on an embroidery machine, and many times these tubular machines, you know, I don't have a table under, there's no stabilizer. I was worried that I might get a loose stitching if I went too long of a stitch length. And, you know, since the thread is so thin, oh look, it's getting nice and exactly where I want it to be. It's about a little more than 1/8 away from, between 1/8 and 1/4 from the satin. So now I'll place that up there, those threads. Anyway, so I've noticed that the quilting thread, and let me see if I can get closer. I've noticed that the quilting thread, it doesn't offer a lot of resistance, which, you know, it's smoother. You know, embroidery thread is twisted and kind of rough, and it offers more resistance, so I can get that tension pull to quilt in the hoop. And so I thought, wow, I wonder if there is a thicker quilting thread that would offer me more resistance. I mean, this is a tubular machine, so I don't know if it's just the make of the machine or the fact that it's tubular, but my Brother SE600 doesn't have a problem pulling up the tension on quilting thread, that smooth quilting thread. So I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure. So I'm checking to make sure that everything's okay here. It looks great. Oh my God, that's really tight. It's really nice and tight. I hope the bottom looks good, because if not, oh well, I screwed up. Because this is a pain to pull out. And yes, I could get under there with a flashlight, but I did use my finger. And I did test this with stabilizer, and I did test it also with quilting. I forgot. I did test it with batting, I should say. And it was fine at these settings. So I just want to make sure, because I don't want to have railroad tracks on the bottom. I want the bottom to look just as nice as the top, of course. And this stitched out beautifully. Okay, so now it's going to stop. And this is where I'm going to make a decision. There's an outline all the way around. So guess what? I think I'm going to stop here. I think I am. Wow, I can't believe I was able to finagle this. And this was hard to digitize. You know, you're going to do this for every applique. I still got to do it for this applique because it's upside down. And so I have to digitize this cutout for an upside down one. You can't just flip this swirl. It's not made to nest as a flipped design, a nesting, or as a flip design. So that's why going forward I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to just all over quilt and then make a patch and then put the patch on wherever I want it. And you know, I'll have to stitch it down though. Now, I think in my other video I said that Stephen Bland from the Idiot Quilter said just get some steam-a-seam and steam it down. Steam-a-seam it down. He says that stuff is just great, even better than heat and bond. Well, I may try that. So, I'm pretty happy. Pretty happy. My next step, I had decided, was not to do a regular nested block down here because I have this to deal with. So I have to digitize this with a hole in it, the nested block with a hole in it, stitch this, then I'll come over and do a regular nested swirl with no hole in it or anything, because then I can place this strategically so as not to bump into this one or this one. You know, this is such a forgiving design. You know, this whole method is forgiving. You can fudge it and move it. So, okay, let's go for the unveiling though and see what the back looks like. Okay, so the back, what is that? Oh, that's a shadow. Got me scared for a minute there. That does look funny, but when you see it in person, it's just like a shadow. It is just normal stitching. And look what I forgot to do. There's a tie off. On my other designs, when I ended, I made a jump far away and then it would cut. You know, I made a jump to maybe 2 stitches or 1 stitch or what have you, because then you can bury that long thread. Well, I forgot to do that. Darn it. So I have to try and bury this knot. And I'm going to have to make sure that my other designs have that. So it looks good though. The stitching looks great. And then the front, I know it's hard to see on the yellow, but it's just as beautiful and it's nice and tight. But remember, I had to wrap the pre-tensioner 1.5 times and go all the way to 9 and dial the check spring all the way down. You can't see that. So, and this is really thin thread, but it is embroidery thread. So I was like 170 on top with the Tajima gauge, that's grams, and I was 100 millinewtons on the bottom, which is 10 grams. So I just realized that there are going to be some people out there whose machine always trims after a color change. And the Janome Mb4 is one of those machines, so I'm assuming it would be the Mb7 and the Mb4s as well. So if you get one of my nested blocks and you need your design to have a long jump stitch at the end so that you could then bury that long thread, let me know. Email me at wequiltstudio@gmail.com, because I'm going to go into my nested block designs and add that feature to all of the files. Even if you have a machine that will leave the long threads, I'm still going to put it in there. For instance, my brother SE600, well, that's a newer machine. Yes, it's only a 4x4 hoop, but I can set that machine to not trim at all, even if it sees a color change. And that's what I had been doing with my 4x4 nested blocks. And now that I'm concentrating on my Mb4, I had forgotten that you have to digitize in a long thread. Okay, so I did go ahead and make the jump stitch on this file here, the nested swirl single run. So this design will start here. So you will do a needle down, needle up, pull up your bobbin thread and grab a long tail, hold that tail and begin your tie on and stitch. And then the design will end here and it'll do a tie off, and then it will make a long jump to about here. So maybe like 4 inches. So there'll be a long tail here that you can pull to the back and make a little knot and bury it as well. And or you can pull the back one to the front and make your knot and bury it. Some people prefer one or the other. This one, they'll both be pulled to the front, so you'll make a single knot about 1/4 of an inch away and then bury it into the batting. Same thing here. Single knot 1/4 inch away and bury it into the batting. So that so far is the only one that I've done in that manner. So I have to do this one and this one, brass bed, and the double run. So these are double stitches over each other. Some people like that for embroidery. If you're using embroidery thread, it makes it look thicker. You know, but some people use quilting thread and they may just want a single run. So I still have to do these two, the complex swirls and the nested circles. So I have to make them there. Now this was one of my first ones I did, and I actually made a starting, like I started a little 5 or 6 stitches. This is the beginning, and then it jumps over to the tie-on. I believe the tie-on's right there, right? You can kind of see it right above it. Every time I move this, it goes over. So that's so you have a good tie-on. These are nested stipple designs like this. There's not really a good way to hide your tie-ons and tie-offs. So I started the tie-on in this manner so that you could jump over to it. However, again, I didn't make it long enough. So I would have to move those 5 stitches maybe to the other side of the design. And then also, I still haven't made the ending jump stitch. So I have a lot of work ahead of me, but the next one I'll do is the nested circles because that's kind of my favorite, and then I'll do the complex swirls. That's another one of my favorites. And I may work on the stipple since it's so popular. And if you purchase anything, like I was saying before I get to it, just let me know what you need and I'll just send it to you. I'll do it real quick for whatever you need, file type and what have you, size, and so on. So that's where we're at. So this is WeQuiltstudio.com, Quilt in the Hoop.